Well, the $2 trillion coronavirus relief package is being held up by Democrats right now, who say it doesn't go far enough. Now, some conservatives disagree, but have serious concerns that the money will be spent willy-nilly all over the place and would prefer it be more closely targeted to certain support programs. Joining us now, Joel Griffith, a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. So let me start out by asking you this, Joel, because I'm assuming you're not crazy about just spending money, as we said, with no focus. But what kind of money would you agree the government should be spending right now, if any?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So we at the Heritage Foundation have been very intent on making sure that we have a focus on delivering targeted, temporary aid to those that are directly impacted. We need to be very careful that we don't allow this spending to become politically motivated or just funneled over to special interest groups. So we propose, for instance, an epidemic tax credit that would go above and beyond even this idea of paid sick leave. Of course, there are people that right now, because they're sick from the virus, but that's just a small number of people relative to the number of people that are being laid off because their bars, their restaurants, those businesses, they're not allowed to be open. So we want businesses to be able to keep folks on the payroll. We understand this is not normal times. It's not the norm where you have the government saying you cannot be operating. And so we want to go ahead and compensate those businesses for keeping individuals on the payroll in these epidemic areas for a short time, for the 60 days or so. And that way people, we don't want people to suffer needlessly, but we also don't want to just be helicoptering $1,000 bills across the country. Let's keep it focused on those that need it most.
You mentioned an epidemic tax credit. That might be a viable option, as you mentioned, but let's talk about history. What have we learned from the past? What are your reservations, and how can we make sure that history in a negative way doesn't repeat itself?
Well, we can look back to crises. Think back to 2008 with the financial crisis, where we had massive stimulus, massive bailouts. We ended up with the government as actual equity holders in automobile companies, insurance companies, and banks. And we also tried massive stimulus. And of course, we ended up with stubbornly high unemployment and the slowest post-World War II recession. So we don't want any of that. We also need to realize, though, that this crisis is also far, far different than other crises, in the fact that this is not just a demand problem where people don't want to go out and spend their money. They actually can't because we've closed businesses. And it's also a supply problem where we have factories across the globe that actually aren't producing because of not just the lack of demand, but because they're actually not able to produce because of the sickness. So that's why we want to focus on getting aid to those that need it. We don't want anybody to end up on the streets. We don't want companies to go bankrupt if we can avoid it. But at the same time, realize that at the heart of this is the virus problem. So we need to make sure that we are testing, that we're treating, that we're quarantining when necessary, and that we're doing this in a way that eventually, hopefully quickly, we can allow people to go ahead and resume normal day-to-day activities when they're not a risk to themselves or others.
Joel, I got about 20 seconds. Should the government take ownership of some of these and then turn it back to them when they get the money back?
No, that's a very dangerous thing to do, and there are ways to avoid it. We've suggested allowing companies to roll back losses from this quarter to prior tax periods, which would give them a refund on prior taxes paid. That is a big bit far better than allowing the federal government to take ownership stock in sectors across this nation.